Now that I knew the engine was good, it was time to start replacing things. First, I replaced the supercharger belt tensioner as well as the idler pulley because those got destroyed in the accident. I also realized that I have a bad steering rack, but because I didn't want to spend a lot of money on all the parts that this car needs, I needed to buy a parts car. So back to Copart we go! Finding our donor was much harder than I expected. I was also limiting my search to same color cars so that I don't have to respray the body panels. It was really hard to find the right deal. Until finally I found this $2,600 A4.
Sold on approval.
With fees and delivery for this car, I paid $4,000 versus the $4,200 I paid for the S4, so basically it was the same price. This A4 was listed as mechanical damage, but I was able to get it to start. It ran poorly, but regardless, all we need is the body parts from it as well as the steering rack. Just to make sure that this car was of the same color, I checked the paint codes and the A4 was LX7R. And I think you have an idea of what happened next. I made a huge mistake and bought a Daytona Gray S4 and the Monsoon Gray A4, so they are slightly different shades of gray. As upsetting as that was, I decided to just stick to my original plan and use the parts car as a parts car, regardless of the different colors, and then hopefully one day I will wrap it. So without further ado, I started tearing it apart. With the doors replaced, I focused on the front end, and that's when I realized that we have frame damage based on how the radiator support was fitting to the S4. As discouraging as that was, I carried on. I replaced the steering racks just to make the S4 more drivable and got started on straightening out the frame rail as well as fixing our unibody fender support. And that brings us to present day. As you can see, this hole for the radiator support isn't lining up perfectly. We could definitely use a little bit more movement out of the frame rail, but I just don't know if I can make it any better. And it does look pretty similar on the other side. I think I'm just gonna call it here and see how it looks with the panels back on. Actually, before I do any assembly, I still have a little bit of disassembly to do. We need to remove this fender and replace it with the one off of the parts car because it got dented by the hood being opened. To do that, I had to remove the fender liner as well as the windshield washer bottle. Now, same thing on the parts car. At this point, I think we've officially removed every single part that we need off of the parts car, and now it's just a matter of putting the S4 back together. I lied, we do have that harness by the passenger side, this guy. So I tried following this back in and seeing where this leads to into the car. I think it goes all the way to the ECU or the body control module in the trunk. I saw it going under the door as well as under into the dash. So both of those are incredibly hard and long to get to. The disassembly required would be very significant. So I don't think we're going to do that. We're just going to cut them and splice in our new harness. Okay, there's no coming back from this. There we go. The color coding is slightly different, but it's all there. We have the same amount of wires on both harnesses, and we should be able to figure this out. So I'm using these, it's like a soldered heat shrink sort of thing that slides onto your wire. Then once you connect it with the other side, slide it back on, use some heat, it'll shrink and it'll also melt the little bit of solder that's inside of here, and that'll just hopefully improve our contact. And just like that, I think we've finished our wiring harness. Now I just have to wrap it up and mount it back to the car. And after that, I think we should be good to reassemble everything. Now, just to make sure that we didn't mess anything up too terribly, let's plug in our headlight and test it. There we go. And high beam, perfect. Apparently I forgot to hit the record button and did a bunch of work without actually recording it, but here we go. We have everything installed, everything is secured, our condenser is in place. So normally I would just put the whole crash bar onto this and mount that all together, but I had to take it apart because I have something that I'm really excited about. A MERCRACING heat exchanger. I don't even know where to begin. Some of you might know this from the previous videos or looking at the comments. Jose from MERCRACING has reached out to me after the very first episode of me rebuilding this car when I had just bought it, and he offered to sponsor me with their heat exchanger. If you're not familiar with MERCRACING, they are pretty big in the supercharger world, especially on this platform, as well as a bunch of Honda platforms that I know nothing about. But I do know that they are by far the most well-rated heat exchangers in the 3.0T community. I'm pretty sure Jose was the very first to offer me any kind of a sponsorship, which is, I mean, at that time was a huge deal to me. And being sponsored by a company like MERCRACING, I knew them way before I got this car. I knew them just from my experience with the 3.0T cars. And yeah, absolutely stoked to have this on my car. Absolutely stoked to have MERCRACING as my sponsor. So if any of you guys are looking for supercharger solutions or heat exchanger solutions for your 3.0Ts, please go to MERCRACING and order from them, because I mean, I think they're just great people there. So this guy is gonna be living right around here, and we are gonna have to mount it. So this car did come with an aftermarket heat exchanger, and I'm not really sure what brand it is made by, but considering the fact that everything on this car is APR, the tune, the ultracharger, the intake, stuff like that, I'm guessing it was probably an APR product. It is made a little differently. For example, instead of a bleeder screw like on the MERCRACING one, we have this guy that allows all the air to escape into here, and this hose leads into these hoses going into here. So basically it is self-bleeding while the MERCRACING is not. However, what really matters is the cooling, and as you can see, the MERCRACING one has a significantly larger core. I'm not even sure what the numbers are. This looks like 2 inches thick, and this is probably 1.5 inches. If you're not familiar, these 3.0 platforms are really known for heat soaking once they are modified and tuned and stuff like that, especially with upgraded pulleys, which this car is. So you definitely want as much cooling as physically possible, and I think MERCRACING provides just that. I do have to admit that the welds on this heat exchanger are incredibly nice. So if you're here for the heat exchanger video, all you need to do is remove the bumper, which is relatively easy to do. First of all, you are going to need to be able to peel off the fender liner. So you're going to remove a couple of screws over here, here, and this clip, which will allow you to peel this guy out. Reach in here and remove the 3 10mm. There's one 10mm bolt going straight into the bumper, and then there's 2 10mm nuts going into the fender that you just need to loosen, which will loosen up this plastic piece and allow you to pop the bumper out. This is going to be the case on both sides, driver and passenger, and then you're going to have 2 of these T25 Torx. Once you have the bumper removed, you're going to have to remove your old heat exchanger, obviously, which is somewhere down here at the bottom. We're going to stick this guy in and make some marks and measurements for where we need the holes drilled in our crash bar. We're going to bolt up our brackets, but we're going to keep things pretty loose because we are probably going to need to make some adjustments. Now once these brackets are more or less stationary and attached to our heat exchanger, we're going to lower it down in here. Place it right where we want to place it. I just want to center it as much as possible with the condenser and radiator. I did make a bit of a mistake here. You should lower it down a little lower because otherwise you're going to have a little bit of clearance issues with your bumper and the grille. At least I did. It's not a huge deal if that's something you run into as well. I just had to trim my bumper ever so slightly. Maybe like a 1/4 inch piece of plastic had to be trimmed away. I'm going to use a paint pen, but you can use a Sharpie pencil, whatever. And we are going to make some marks right where the holes for the bolts are. Once we do have our marks, we are going to remove these 4 bolts and nuts that hold the crash bar to the crash bar supports. And then this is going to give you some trouble with getting out of here, and you're going to need to get a little aggressive with it. We're going to put our crash bar upside down, line up the holes, make another set of marks. The screws that were included in the kit are self-tapping, but I think it's going to be quite a challenge trying to get these to cut through this piece of aluminum, which is relatively thick. So I'm going to give it a little bit of help with a drill bit. I am using a 13/64 drill bit. I'm not sure if that is the advised size, but it is just slightly smaller than our screw, which I think is the best option. Whenever drilling metal, remember to put in as much pressure as the drill bit is willing to take and go slow. You do not want to go fast because that is going to make things hot. And when a drill bit gets hot, it's not really going to be doing much drilling anymore. We want these 2 hose receptacles to be on the bottom driver's side of the car. So that's how we're going to position the heat exchanger, line it up, and send in our screws. And now this guy is pretty secure to the crash bar. And then we just slide this whole thing in here, line it up with a rubber mallet, and tighten down these bolts. Okay, I really don't want to jinx myself, but I think if everything goes well, we might be able to drive this car today. And I mean drive it properly, not just around my parking lot. Thank you so much to MERCRACING for providing this heat exchanger. Honestly, one of the coolest moments in my life when I saw Jose's DM. First, I'm going to fully tighten down our crash bar. I think we're ready for that. Now, because we had a different kind of heat exchanger here before, instead of trying to plug up this T on this side, I might as well just replace everything from here down to there. I should have a properly sized hose for this. And there we go. Enough length. Next, we're just going to connect our 2 hoses. This one seems a bit short. I think we're just going to try and feed it through this radiator hose right here, because I'm not sure if that was cut before or maybe the stock heat exchanger just sits a little further out and these hoses are enough, but in my case it isn't. Potentially I should have mounted this a little more to the right, but that seems unusual because we don't really want it to be offset. I think that would look weird. So maybe we do just have a cut hose or something along those lines. I just want to mount this in a way that our hose doesn't rub on any sharp plastics, because with time, if it does, it will develop leaks, and we definitely would like to avoid that. Throw on our clamps. While we're here, let's address this. So what this here is our headlight washer system. The A4 bumper does not have the cutouts for the headlight washers, and that's good because I honestly don't really like headlight washer systems. And we're going to be deleting that. So I'm probably just going to cap this off. And for that, I'm going to use this guy. So this is just a little coupler that comes on the OEM hose, which we do not want to have anymore. So I'm just going to try and use this coupler for our cap, because I think this would make it look nice and clean. Unfortunately, this is the closest size I have, and it's not perfect, but luckily the headlight washer system is not super pressurized, so I don't think this is going to blow off. There we go, and now we're just going to attach this to this little quick disconnect right here. And I think that should do it. Now it's time to start hunting down all of our electrical connections and making sure that we know where they go. I don't remember where the crash sensors are. That's a bit of a problem. Oh, this is for home link on the bumper to the garage opener. This is probably our horn. Hood sensor that would let us know if our hood was open. Fog light, temperature sensor. that plugs in and then goes right here, I think. Let's see if this will tighten down, because I know that these were not lined up too well. Ah, it's perfect. Okay. I was really hoping that this car was going to have aftermarket supercharger bleeder screws, because this is frequently used to bleed the air bubbles out of the actual supercharger. Because there is two little radiators inside of the supercharger here, and sometimes there's air pockets in there, especially considering how high the supercharger sits comparing to the rest of the cooling system. But unfortunately, no, this car has the stock plastic ones, and the problem with that, as you would imagine, plastic ones frequently strip and don't really like to stay in one piece when you remove them. But oh well. I think I'm gonna try and bleed this without those for now. And then if we have any cooling issues, then I will mess around with the bleeder screws and see if they will loosen up for us. Ah, I think it's the heat exchanger. We're making some contact with the heat exchanger, so we might have to do some trimming. So this piece of the grill right here is what interferes with our heat exchanger. We're gonna have to make some changes. Let's see if there's anything I can do to lower it. I would, but that would involve drilling in new holes for the heat exchanger in the crash bar. Really not trying to do all that, so we're gonna leave it this way. The heat exchanger is gonna stay right here, and then we're just gonna trim the bumper a tiny bit. Gonna make our mark. I think just this piece right here is what we need to address. Potentially the same spot on the other side. Yeah, the paint pen doesn't like to work on dirty things. I was gonna use a Dremel, but since we have this plastic welder right here already, might as well just use that. Actually, what I could do is just move the heat exchanger back a bit. I didn't think about that. Yeah, that would solve our problem. I'm so dumb. I'm so dumb. If you remember, the brackets for the heat exchanger did have some adjustment to them, so that's exactly what we're going to use. We're going to loosen up these bolts a little bit and slide the heat exchanger back. Now, if you're here for the heat exchanger install, in order to remove the bumper, you're going to have 3 10 mils to remove on the side here. There's one 10mm bolt that will be right there, right under the headlight, and then there's 2 10mm nuts on these little studs. Now, as some of you may know from the previous videos, my upper control arms and potentially more suspension components are bent because this wheel, the one that took the biggest hit, is definitely cambered in, as well as the toe is out. So I'm hoping it's just our upper control arms. Potentially there's more, but just from a visual inspection, I do think that our upper control arms are bent. And these are aftermarket 034 Motorsports control arms, which are relatively expensive, and I really hated the fact that I need to buy a whole kit for both sides when I only need one side. But when I reached out to them, they were nice enough to provide us with a pretty heavily discounted set of brand new control arms. So huge shout out to 034. I mean, they're an absolutely fantastic brand. I've been using them for ages. Our Black V8.5 S4 is tuned with their stage 1. Besides offering software upgrades, they also do a lot of hardware upgrades, largely suspension pieces, which I think is fantastic. I have a lot of their suspension parts on multiple of my cars, like the rear sway bar on the B5 S4 or the density line control arms, also on my B5 S4. This car also has their rear sway bar as well as the end links. Basically, absolutely huge fan of this brand, and I'm very glad that they were willing to help us out with this rebuild. So what's great about these control arms is that they allow you to relatively easily adjust your camber. As you might know, Audis don't come with adjustable camber from stock. From factory, there's nothing you can do about your camber settings, and you just have to take it. This is a problem especially for people who lower their cars. Whenever you mess around with the ride height, your camber is going to be affected as well. Usually the lower you'll go, the more the wheel will cave in. The higher you go, the more the wheel will camber out. And if you're unable to adjust your camber and you lower your car, you're gonna have excessive camber wear on your tires, causing them to get worn out way quicker than expected. But these guys are supposed to be pretty easily adjustable. It's kind of hard to show to you on the car, but basically we have this guy inside of here. And as you can see, there's a little bolt on top that you can loosen up and have this ball joint slide off. That is one heavy boy. All right. All right, let's align our hood. I'm also going to do a little bit of alignment of this headlight or fender. We'll see exactly what it needs. I'm not entirely sure, but as you can see, this sticks out quite a bit. While we do not have that here. This lines up perfectly. I think I might also just start the car so that we bleed our coolant. And by the time I'm done setting the rest of this up, I can take it for a drive. I'm gonna need to turn our heat on. So far, no active coolant leaks, or so it seems. Oh, that is bad. That is very, very bad. We'll look into those later, but for now, I need to try and get the coolant to bleed because my heat is still blowing cold air. That was about 5,000 RPM, and that actually looks like to have pushed the air bubbles out, and now I have heat inside. So I think we can consider our coolant bled. I don't see any overheating. We got heat out of the vents, and everything seems to work. I don't think there's any coolant leaks. At least that is squared away. Now, I definitely have an issue with my hood alignment. And potentially just deep frame damage, because this is sitting pretty low, and I'm not sure I can do anything to fix that. It also doesn't seem to want to close. Looks like we're a little off to the left. I'm gonna deal with the panel gaps later. What matters now is how she drives. I've been waiting for this moment for almost 2 months now. Don't mind this, don't mind that. I'm also blasting heat because it's a little spotty. It kind of comes and goes. So we're definitely gonna have to give it some relatively high RPM to try and get all the coolant bubbles to bleed through. All right, let's drive. This is so cool. Oh, yes. All right, and some of our lights went away. My TPMS light went away, as well as my parking brake fault. Awesome. I do have a check engine light and an airbag. That's to be expected, but it could be our secondary air injection system because we currently have no SAI pump. Oh man, this is amazing. Drives pretty good. The wheel alignment isn't that bad. I honestly expected it to be worse. Oh my god, this is so cool, guys. Oh man, forget about the fact that I have destroyed quarter panel and misaligned hood, like terribly misaligned. The panel gaps are so freaking bad right now, but none of that matters. Woo! I haven't floored it yet. We're saving this for later, but she's freaking quick. She is quick. All right, I think we can turn off our heat now. I wonder if our AC works. It was really hard to tell if the AC condenser ever got broken. It didn't look that there were leaks, but it's entirely possible that there were. Yeah, I don't think we have AC. That's something I should have checked. See, whenever I click the AC button, it just turns right off. Well, it has been a few days now, and let's see. We have done 57 miles on this car. I actually just got it from the alignment shop yesterday, and it drives fantastically. Everything is perfect. I absolutely love it. Obviously, we are gonna have some issues to work out still. I can literally get my finger in there and it goes past the weather strip. So technically there might be a little bit of water intrusion getting into here, which is a bit of an issue, but not that big of an issue. The water would have to go in a multitude of directions in order to get inside the car. Issue number 2, we have no AC, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. I'm pretty sure the A4 condenser is the same, so I can install that, and I recently acquired the gauges and the pump to suck out the air from the system, so I should be able to service my AC once it comes to that. But for now, I mean, it's not a priority. I'm working on some other stuff in there at the moment. Issue number 3, we have condensation in the headlight, which is very, very annoying. That's another issue. This came off of the A4, which was boiling over coolant, and we have all this coolant residue all over the place. As you remember, our engine bay was really dirty. I did give that a nice wash. As you can see, hood closes with relatively minimal effort. Our panel gaps are pretty bad. They're definitely the worst on the hood. Like bumper to fender is pretty solid. Fender to door, pretty solid. This fender to door, pretty good as well. And this is pretty bad because our quarter panel is destroyed. But yeah, the hood is bad. Even though I've replaced my hinges, for some reason, something is just not very good here. Could it be structural damage? Potentially. And then last issue, of course, airbags. That is definitely a little inconvenient. Well, maybe not inconvenient, but a little unsafe. You know, it's a few $100, which I'm not ready to spend at the moment because I want to finish this car. That will be in another video, but what is kind of related to this video is the parts car. I did mention it in one of the previous videos. Because it's a parts car, I've put all my destroyed panels on this. It is never going to look good. It is always going to be in a pretty bad shape. Not to mention the mechanical damage that initially brought this car to Copart, which I'm guessing is our timing chain. Luckily, the timing chain is relatively serviceable on this, so I do plan on doing that, as well as the water pump, since obviously we have some sort of a coolant issue. Maybe that's already fixed, but I'm guessing it's a coolant issue. Long story short, the resale value of this car is going to be very, very low because of the condition it's in. It has multiple title brands like Rebuilt, Flood, and odometer mileage not actual. So, I mean, yeah, if I wanted to fully rebuild this car, it would be worth like maybe $7,000, but it's not really worth rebuilding. I mean, for the same reasons why I bought a parts car to fix the S4, all of these parts on their own are going to be very expensive and not worth doing. So, what my plan is, what I want to do is turn this into a dedicated race car build, which is something I've never had before. I had my B5 S4, which is technically my race car, but I've never tracked it. I've never done anything with it. So I'm seeing two options for this car, and I would like to get your guys' opinion about this. Once I fix the mechanical damage, should I turn it into like an autocross racetrack car or a rally build? And I am throwing these terms out there loosely. I don't know how achievable it is for me to actually track it or rally it. That is a very expensive thing to do, but would be something I would love to do. And considering that our body is going to be trashed in multiple points, we might as well do something like that, right? Do something that doesn't really require the car to be clean, such as rallying. I think that would be super awesome. I do have some friends who do that, so maybe they can guide me a little bit through the process. We could throw some Q5 suspension in this. That's something that the Humble Mechanic has done. I don't know if you're familiar with his YouTube channel, but he has done that on an S4, a B8 S4. Apparently the Q5 suspension bolts up to the B8 chassis. So what do you guys think? Should we do a rally build or an autocross build or racetrack? I don't really even know the terminology. I'm not familiar with this sort of thing, but I would love to know what you guys would prefer to see. I think rallying would be cheaper. What I do know for sure is that I definitely want to fix the mechanical damage on this car and see if we can at least make it drivable. It would be a pretty solid daily on the inside. So that's probably the plan for this car. If you guys are interested in catching that, make sure you're subscribed, and I would love if you liked the video so that other people can discover me and make this channel grow. But back to the S4. So what's the plan here? I mean, I'll be straightforward with you guys as always. Money is an issue. I cannot afford doing the body work on this right now. I can't really afford doing the airbags. I can, but it's just not a priority to me personally. But I'm sure that sooner or later we're gonna get this car squared away. Obviously, we also need the paint work. As you can see, I mean, it's really not that noticeable, but under certain angles it's certainly more noticeable than others and does not look very good, which is fine to me. Honestly, I care more about function, as you know, rather than the looks. So also something I want to do quick is change this taillight out because it is cracked. To an extent, this rebuild is done because I can now daily this car, and that's exactly what I have been. I'm having an absolute blast. Thank you very much for watching and have a great day.